Remorse is out now on Amazon Prime Video. It is what I consider to be the 6th installment of the Jack Ryan film series, even though the character Jack Ryan isn't even in the movie. Yeah, it's a spin-off. To me, it's all the same thing. John Clark, a Navy SEAL, goes on a path to avenge his wife's murder only to find himself inside of a larger conspiracy. Taylor Sheridan, who has written some of my favorite movies, is a co-writer on this movie. I wasn't really sure what to think about that because Taylor Sheridan has such a unique style in his writing. He really tries to break the rules of writing a screenplay. Tries to come up with something very unconventional. He's mentioned that Sicario is structured as a 5-act structure with another 5-act structure within that 5-act structure. So if you know what I'm talking about here. And when he's writing exposition, he's doing it as a way to better the character rather than move the plot forward. And serving as a co-writer on this movie, I'm not really sure if his upcoming film, Those Who Wish Me Dead, which looks really great by the way, either got more focus than this film, or if he just took a back seat to the screenplay, because he's also credited for the story for this movie as well. It was just painful to see such a generic movie from such a talented writer, from a writer who has written and directed great movies as well. Wind River is up there. Sicario is up there. Hell or High Water he's written, and that was great. And I'll give him Sicario too. Like, even though Sicario did not need a sequel, Sicario Day of the Soldado wasn't terrible. It was just mind-boggling to see somebody who had such a unique voice when it comes to writing a movie revert to such a generic script and such a generic writing style that really didn't offer anything new. This is a story that has been told millions of times before, and that's fine. You can do that in a movie. You have to add a unique take to it or a fresh take to it. That's not to say that the movie doesn't offer anything good. Michael B. Jordan's serviceable in the role. The direction by Stefano Sollima is adequate. It does feel like he is making a wannabe military movie disguised as a CIA thriller. But when the action is happening on screen, the action sequences are at least in camera. You can tell what's going on. Some great wide shots in there. There are some shots that are briefly extended, so that was greatly appreciated. So the action was serviceable, and that's the best compliment I have for this movie. It's serviceable. I'll say this. I'm going to be comparing this movie to the 5 other Jack Ryan movies. Obviously, I don't think you're going to touch The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger. Those are like the top 3 Jack Ryan movies. Shadow Recruit is just slightly better. I will say I enjoyed this a lot more than The Sum of All Fears. I hate The Sum of All Fears. So this at least was an enjoyable experience in that regard. But despite some really cool action sequences, especially this extended action sequence that brought some life to the movie, and I'll talk a little bit more about it when I talk about one of my negatives with the movie. The action for an R-rated movie that is rated R solely because of the violence. Violence in this movie felt very cleansed and sanitized. This felt very PG-13 level. People get shot, there's barely any blood splatter. Like, you'll see some blood on, like, the back of a wall or something, or you'll see, like, a blood stain on a shirt. That's about it. To me, there is nothing that really warrants an R rating for this movie. Minimal swearing. There's a couple of things in the beginning that propel the movie along that could make it rated R. Like, there is a death where I laughed at it because I wasn't 100% sure if it was intentionally funny or if they were trying to be super serious in that moment. So I gave it a sly chuckle. But I would say other than that moment, there's nothing in this movie that warrants the R rating. You can tell that they were going for that PG-13 rating because originally this was going to be released theatrically, got released to a streaming service. Like, well, we don't have to worry about the box office numbers, so we'll just make it rated R when it clearly was not filmed to be rated R. I hate when movies do this. But I think the biggest problem I have with Without Remorse is the fact that you're taking established lore and established characters from previous Jack Ryan movies. Like, Michael B. Jordan is playing Willem Dafoe's character from Clear and Present Danger. My problem here is that those movies are good because they have, not only do they have good characters and good stories, but they focus more on tension and suspense over the action. This movie attempts to do that, but it doesn't do a good job at it. It's more of an action movie rather than an action thriller. Clear and Present Danger, Patriot Games, and The Hunt for Red October especially, were more action thrillers. I miss those days, the good old 90s action thrillers. Those 3 movies I just mentioned. Throw GoldenEye into that mix too, and the first Mission Impossible movie. Movies that relied more on tension and suspense and building character and telling a well-rounded story. Those are the days of action thrillers that I miss. As I said, it seemed like they were trying to go for a more military angle, disguising itself as a CIA thriller, but with more emphasis on action rather than tension and suspense. Now, that action sequence that I was talking about that happens towards the end of the second act of the movie was by far the best sequence of the entire movie because I felt like the stakes were high. I felt like the tension and the suspense was built up to in that scene, and you'll understand why when you watch it, because there's something happening. And I was like, oh shit, they really gotta get out of this situation. I never had that feeling in any other sequence in this movie. I honestly did not want that sequence that I'm talking about to end because I was engrossed in how tension-filled it was and how suspenseful it was. It was an elongated sequence, yes, and there were some really good fights in that sequence, but the rest of the movie just lacked that tension and suspense that was present in that sequence, and I wish that they had just followed the blueprint of those first 3 Jack Ryan movies and created a more tension-filled, suspenseful action thriller that had a great story and great characters. There are characters introduced into the second half of this movie that are just there as background characters. They say their names and that's it. Why do I care? Because we all know if you're just going to say your name, they're expendable. That's it. If that's all they got going for them, they're expendable. They're dead. So while I think Michael B. Jordan was an adequate choice to play John Kelly, I think he gives an adequate performance. The direction is somewhat fine despite feeling more like a military movie than a CIA thriller, and some tension raised in that really great action sequence, and at least some great action choreography mixed in, and you can actually tell what's happening with the action sequences. It feels a bit too sanitized. The story is super predictable, which is a shame from a writer like Taylor Sheridan. It seemed like they did not know what story they wanted to tell because they deviate heavily from the book, from my understanding, and update the setting to a modern day setting rather than the setting in the book. The movie also sequel baits with a mid-credit scene. We gotta stop this, Hollywood. Stop with your trends. They're getting annoying. Nobody's a fan of these trends. I just wish this wasn't so predictable. So uninvesting, I guess. Aside from a couple of sequences, I guessed who the villain was the moment that character walked into frame. It was way too obvious. This is by far one of the weaker movies in the Jack Ryan series. It's better than The Sum of All Fears, but it's not better than any of the other 4, especially those first 3 with Alec Baldwin and Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan. No way. You're not touching those. I'm sorry. I'm going to say you will enjoy Without Remorse only with half a bucket of popcorn. And that's only because of that great action scene and the action being in camera and focused with some wides and a few lengthy shots here and there. But you just look at this movie as one of those movies that's on in the background. A background movie. That's the best way to describe Without Remorse. So guys, what do you think of Without Remorse? Have you seen it yet? I'm curious as to what you think. Drop me some feedback in the comment section below. I will leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies somewhere.